Hello, everyone. We have a few people joining last minute, but we do want to get started right on time. We do really appreciate all of you being here. My name is Brittany. I am one of the educators and a member of the community engagement team at the National Marine Mammal Foundation. And we want to thank you very much for joining us today for our scientific snapshot featuring a member of our conservation biology team here at the National Marine Mammal Foundation. She's also a PhD student, Katie Chrisman. If you're unfamiliar with the National Marine Mammal Foundation, our mission is to improve and protect life for marine mammals, humans, and our shared oceans through science, service, and education. And we are a 501c3 located right here in San Diego, California. As Katie's introducing herself, feel free to put it in the chat where you're calling in from. And we want to thank you again for joining us today. Just a few ground rules. If you have any questions, go ahead and just put them in the chat. And we will address questions at the end. We'll leave some time for that. But other than that, please enjoy. Katie, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I am really excited to give this talk tonight. And as Brittany said, I am a research associate with the National Marine Mammal Foundation, and I'm also a UCSD PhD student in Tim Gettner's lab. And today I'll be talking all about studying echolocation in bottlenose dolphins. So you first actually might be asking yourself, why do we even study echolocation? Why is this important? And why do we care? So there's a few different reasons that we care. One of the reasons is that dolphins are really, really good at what they do. They're very good at discriminating between objects in their environment and foraging and navigating their environment with sound. And because they are so good at what they do, they outperform any man-made systems that we currently have. And so a lot of government organizations are interested in how we can build better sonars by studying the dolphins' biosonar. But additionally, there's a lot of diverse echolocating species in our oceans, and to better understand how we can protect them from different sounds that we put into the water, we can study the bottlenose dolphin and its echolocation to better protect those other species that we aren't able to get as up close and personal with. And so all of our toothed whales that live in the ocean are going to be echolocating species, and those are going to be our Odontocetes. And to date, there's 75 species known, but there's new species being discovered all the time. And so this just shows us how much we don't know about our ocean still. There are still new species, as I said, being discovered, which is pretty cool. And the species are very diverse. So the whale that you see on your screen right now, and you might be thinking to yourself, I've never even seen a whale that looks like this before, is actually a Blainville's beaked whale. And our beaked whales are one of our deepest divers and longest breath holders. So beaked whales can actually dive up to almost 3 kilometers in depth. And they've been known to hold their breath for over 3 hours on some of their dives. And so this tells you how hard it is to study this type of echolocating species because they're so elusive. We can't get up close to them, and we can't really understand more about them because they are such deep divers. But because we can study bottlenose dolphins, we can use them as a model to better protect other echolocating species. And so let's get a little bit more into echolocation and how echolocation actually works. And I know that I'm pretty privileged to be able to say that I've heard a dolphin echolocate, I've seen a dolphin echolocate, but I still remember the first time that I heard a dolphin echolocate. And I say heard, not seen, because one of the really cool things about echolocation is that dolphins, when they echolocate, nothing externally is moving sometimes. So they're doing this really cool thing. And unlike us as humans, when we talk and our mouth moves, nothing is moving a lot of times when they're echolocating. And that's because they initially originate those clicks or those sounds that they're producing through their nasal complexes, which are going to be right under here below their blowhole. And then they're emitted through this yellow area on their forehead region, which we actually call their melon. And then that sound's emitted into their environment. It's going to reflect off of an object, and then it's going to be heard back by the animal through an acoustic window that's actually in their jaw. So their ears look a little bit different externally than ours do, obviously. They have this window, as I said, in their jaw that they actually receive that sound through. Now, these clicks that they produce are super, super short in duration. They're usually only about 10 to 70 microseconds. So they're very, very quick. And they also are a very broadband sound. And so all that really means when we say broadband is that it's made up of a lot of different frequencies. And so for the bottlenose dolphin click, it ranges from 20 kilohertz all the way up to 130 kilohertz, which is well above our human range of hearing for a lot of what's going on during echolocation. So now I'm actually going to show everyone a really quick video, which I think is super cool because in this video, you can hear the dolphin echolocating. Before I play it, I do want to go over a little bit about working with the Navy dolphins, what their spaces look like, and kind of orient everyone to what this research looks like. So here on the pens, you'll actually see the space that the dolphin's she's gonna gate out, and she's actually gonna leave her space to go into San Diego Bay. And so the pens that the animals are living in, these spaces, they actually have doorways out into San Diego Bay, so they can go out and do research and work and have enrichment in a free release environment. And then you'll see the spaces that are adjoining. There's actually tunnels from space to space. And so this allows the animals to swim freely from space to space and allows us to have them in positive social groups and to be able to work one-on-one with their trainers as well when they're in those spaces. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this video started.
And as that video does get started, I'm sorry to interrupt Katie, but if you are not muted, please do make sure to mute yourself. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
And so as you see, this Navy dolphin, she's out in San Diego Bay now. And at first she's just gonna kind of swim around, enjoy herself, have a little enrichment out there. And then her trainer is actually going to ask her to wear this suction cup right on her melon. But this is going to allow us to record what she's doing underwater. And she's actually going to go find a fish that was dropped in the water. And so in this video, you can hear her echolocating. So the clicking noise you hear is actually her finding that fish and echolocating. We'll go ahead and watch her do this one more time because it's so cool. And then once she's done, her trainer is going to take that suction cup back off. And then she's going to hang out in San Diego Bay for a little bit longer. The dolphins find sort of working out there pretty enriching. So we let them both follow and hang out with their trainers out there. And then eventually we'll ask them back into their spaces where the other animals are living. And there she goes, back through the door, back home. And so let's talk a little bit about what is actually happening here. What is happening during echolocation? And so the first thing I'm going to talk about is how in this video she was able to determine how far away that fish was from her. And so that while a dolphin's echolocating, the way that they determine the distance to an object is actually by emitting that click and then waiting for the echo to come back. And the time it takes between when they emit that click and when the echo comes back is how they know how far away the object is. So if you notice when she was approaching that fish, the closer and closer she got to it, the quicker she was actually emitting those clicks. And that's because she doesn't have to wait as long for the echo to come back when the object is closer. So she'll emit the next click a little bit quicker. Now, additionally, we might ask, how does the dolphin know the object is a fish? Or how does the dolphin discriminate between different objects in their environment? And this is actually a pretty big question in echolocation that we still don't know all the answers to. But one thing that we do know is that different objects will reflect a different echo that has a unique frequency spectrum. And I know that's a pretty big scientific term, but the best way to think of that is the pitch that the dolphin perceptually is hearing. And so we can think of that as, did that echo have a high pitch? Did that echo have a low pitch? And we do know that's one of the ways that the dolphins can discriminate between different objects is by the frequency or the pitch of the echo that they're receiving. And now the last thing is, how does the dolphin know the size of the object when they're echolocating? And the bigger the object is, the more reflective it's going to be. And so the echo that they receive back from a large object is typically going to sound louder or be higher in amplitude than an echo from a smaller object. And so by listening to how loud that echo is, they can determine if the object is really large or if the object is really small. And so now that I've gone over some of these things, I'm going to play just the part where she's approaching the fish. So you can listen for what I just talked about, specifically hearing her really speed up how fast she's clicking when she gets closer and closer to that object. And so I'm sure everyone could hear that once they knew what they were listening for. And it's really awesome that we can get some of this data from a GoPro. However, echolocation is really, really hard to study. We don't actually get a lot of information from the GoPro when we're looking at it. And it's hard to study for a couple of different reasons. The first one is something I already mentioned. The center frequency of echolocation goes all the way up to 130 kilohertz, which is well above our human range of hearing. And if you look at the graph that's on the screen, we actually have a line for a human audiogram, a sea lion audiogram, and a dolphin audiogram. On the y-axis here, we have the sound pressure level that's played. So that's just how loud does the sound have to be played for the animal to be able to hear it at that frequency? Or how low can we play that sound before the animal can no longer hear it at that frequency? And you'll see for humans, their kind of good range of hearing is going to be between 100 hertz all the way up to about 10,000 hertz or 10 kilohertz. But for the dolphin, it's much higher than that. Their good range of hearing is going to be between 10 kilohertz all the way up to 100 kilohertz. And so that's sort of that prime area where echolocation is going on. So that makes it pretty difficult to study because we as humans actually can't hear what's going on when these dolphins are echolocating. Additionally, the speed of sound in water is 1,500 meters per second, which is 5 times faster than air. So those sound waves are moving really, really quickly. And to be able to do recordings and actually analyze data and record data, it takes a lot more high-tech equipment when things are moving that fast. It takes a little bit of extra stuff going on to be able to study the sound underwater. And then lastly, using physical objects is pretty difficult. As you can imagine, it's pretty inaccurate because they move with the current in the water. It takes a lot of people to place them in the water and remove them from the water. So this becomes kind of a challenge as well. And so next, I'm going to actually talk through 2 primary experiments that we've conducted in the last couple of years with the National Marine Mammal Foundation and the Navy Marine Mammal Program that go through how we've been able to answer some of these questions about echolocation, and with some of today's technology, how we can sort of ask the dolphins really unique questions and be able to get answers to them. So the first question we wanted to answer was, normally, if a dolphin's navigating in their environment, they will send out that click, and then they will get an echo back from the object that they are echolocating on. But what if the animal's not echolocating? What if we had recorded echoes and played them to the dolphin? Would they perceive them the same way as the echoes that they receive when they're echolocating? And if they do, what features of the echoes are they using to be able to sort of perceive them in the same way? So you might be asking yourself, how in the world do you ask a dolphin this question, or how do you set up this experiment? And so the way that we did it was to train a bottlenose dolphin to wear eye cups and perform a 3 alternative forced choice match to sample task with a physical object as a sample. Okay, that's a big bullet point, and I know there was a lot said there. So let's break it down a little bit. And so the first thing I want to talk about is actually the eye cups that you'll see the dolphin wearing in this video. So those are actually just soft silicone cups that cover the dolphin's eyes. And this ensures that she's not using any visual cues when she's doing this task. Now, it might seem pretty weird to cover the animal's eyes, but when we think about how these animals sort of navigate their spaces, they're using sound. So their primary sensory system to navigate their environment is sound. For humans, it's typically vision. And so if I were to get up and walk around my room right now, I could cover my ears and still be able to walk around my room without any issues. In the same way, when we cover the dolphin's eyes, they are still able to navigate their spaces really, really well with their eyes covered. And then additionally, you'll see our trainer placing those eye cups on this dolphin's eyes. And our trainers build really positive relationships with these animals. Without them, we actually would not be able to do any of this behavioral research that we do without those trusting positive relationships. So you'll see, I have a video a little later, the dolphin very willingly accepts the eye cups and is pretty eager to participate in this research project. And now let's next talk about the next part that's mentioned, the 3 alternative force choice. So what that means is when the dolphin is asked to make a response to what we're showing her, she has 3 choices and she can choose between 3 different objects. If there are only 2 objects, this would be a 2 alternative force choice task. So it's just talking about how many objects the animal has to choose from. And then the match to sample task means that this is a matching task. So the dolphin will be shown an object to echolocate on, and then she'll be released and shown 3 objects, and she has to pick the object that she was just shown. And so initially when we did this with physical objects, and then we actually took those physical objects to a quiet pool, and we projected a simulated dolphin click on them and recorded the echoes that bounced off of those objects. So with those recorded echoes, we were then able to play them back to the dolphin in the second series of the experiment. And then we were able to compare the results from the 2 different experiments. And if this is a little fuzzy right now, I know it's kind of complicated. I do have a video in 2 slides to help bring everything together for everyone. So now these are the 3 objects that we used for this task. And you might be thinking, wow, those are really odd objects to pick to show to a dolphin. But the reason they were chosen is because they're very, very different from one another. And so they have 3 very different compositions. We have a steel triangle, an aluminum fuel bottle, and then a plastic broom. And so because they're so different in composition and shape, the echoes that reflect from those objects are going to be very, very different. And this gives the animal the best chance of success when they're doing this task because those echoes are so different from one another. And on the screen, you'll actually see the 3 different echo waveforms. So the top one is going to be the triangle. The one right below it in red is going to be the bottle. And then the one right below that in blue is going to be the broom. So you can look at those echo sound waveforms and even visually see, wow, they're really different from one another. So they should sound very different to the animal as well. So now I'm going to play a short video so everyone can see what this task actually looks like. And so as you'll see, as I had mentioned earlier, the trainer is asking the dolphin in this video to accept the eye cups, which she very gladly does. And then she's placed in a position where she can echolocate on that broom. Then she's released and she'll go underwater to make the correct match. And then once she chooses the correct match, she'll just return back to her trainer for her fish reward. And now in this part of it, you'll notice that physical object's gone. When she goes underwater, there's now a sound trajectory that through the computer is going to play her a specific waveform of one of those objects. And then you'll see her above the water this time. Go ahead and make the correct choice again. And then return back to her trainer for her fish reward. Now, I do want to talk about 2 different sounds that you may have heard in this video that clearly aren't the dolphin echolocating, but sound that we're putting into the water. And then you'll notice that each time that the dolphin chose the correct object, she heard a buzzing sound. Now that buzzing sound is actually what we call our underwater bridge. But the best way to think of this for anyone who might have pets at home who's ever done any sort of clicker training, it's very similar to the clicker. And so just like you pair a clicker with food so that you can capture the right behavior that your dog is doing, we're doing the same thing with the dolphins. And so they're trained that that bridge means that they're going to receive reinforcer. It is paired with food in the beginning. And then that bridges the time between when she gets the answer correct and she returns to our trainer. So it's our way of capturing that correct response and communicating to her that she got the answer correct. And when she returns to her trainer, she'll be getting a fish reward. And for anyone that's ever been to public facilities, zoos and aquariums, and you see trainers with whistles, it's very similar to also using that whistle to communicate to a dolphin or to an animal that they did the correct thing and they're going to receive fish reward for it. Okay, so let's take a look at our objects again. By watching the video, we can tell that this animal was able to learn this task in both paradigms, whether she was shown the physical object or whether we played the echoes to her. But how was she doing this task? And that's still a question, as I said, echolocation is still being studied. That's still a question we don't really know the answer to. And so if we take a look at the 3 echoes that we were playing to her from each object, and we kind of break down how they're different. And so on the y-axis here is actually the amplitude or how loud those echoes are. You'll notice the echo for the triangle is going to be perceptually the loudest to her, and the one for the broom is the quietest. So she could have just learned that the loudest echo matches the triangle, the quietest echo matches the broom. But if you look at the waveform of each echo, you'll notice that's also different. And so this goes back to the pitch or the frequency spectrum of those echoes. So each echo that we played her had a different pitch to her. So she maybe learned that one pitch matched the triangle and a different pitch matched the broom. And so what sounds she was actually listening to be able to do this task and be successful, we're not really sure of. But I think this is a really important point, because a lot of times people will talk about echolocation as being able to see with sound. But we don't really know how the animals are perceiving and using these echoes. We don't know what type of representation they're building in their minds to know what's going on in their environment. We know they're super accurate at doing what they do, but whether they're building an actual visual representation of their environment through echolocation, current research can't exactly say that that's what they're doing. So that's one thing that a lot of scientists are still very interested in learning. So I'm going to shift now to the second experiment that I mentioned. And this one gets a little bit more high tech and I think is really, really cool and exciting. So I'm very excited to be able to share it with everyone. And I still remember when I first started working with a phantom echo generator, I was sort of in awe that we had a tool like this and we could do experiments like this with the dolphin. So it's super exciting to still be working on projects that involve this. And so the phantom echo generator is a novel tool we can use to study echolocation. And it's actually made up of 2 different hydrophones. One of the hydrophones will receive the dolphin's click when the dolphin's echolocating. The click will get sent inside to a computer, and an electronic echo will be created and projected back to the dolphin through that second hydrophone. Now, what this actually does is simulate to the dolphin that an object is present. Now, there's nothing physically there, but throughout this presentation or the rest of the presentation when I'm going through this, I'm going to use physical objects so that we as humans can visually sort of understand what task we are asking the dolphins to do. And then a lot of times we do get asked, when the dolphins are participating in these tasks, how do they perceive the phantom echo generator? And the answer to this is that we don't actually know. And this sounds a little crazy, but if I had to make any sort of comparison, I would compare it to some sort of virtual reality game. And the reason for that is because when we as humans play virtual reality games, our visual system perceives objects in our environment that aren't really there. I don't know if anyone's ever had 3D goggles on and they're watching a movie and something comes flying out of the screen and they've actually ducked because they think something is there, but it's really not. You know it's not there, but you think it is. And this is sort of how I think the dolphins interpret the phantom echo generator. Instead of their visual system, their auditory system is perceiving objects in their environment that aren't really there. And by using this, we're able to ask them a lot of really cool and unique questions about echolocation. And so some of the previous phantom echo generator tasks that we have conducted have asked questions to the dolphin, such as, when does the object or target appear? And in these tasks, the dolphins were underwater and they were asked to produce a whistle response, in this case, when that object appeared. And then additionally, when does the object start to move? When does the object change from one object to another object, which we call usually object A or target A to object B or target B? Now, in 2020, we kind of got a little bit more creative and we built a 2-peg system. So now instead of one phantom echo generator that the dolphin was echolocating on, the dolphin was actually able to echolocate on 2 separate phantom echo generators. And the first question we decided to answer with the 2-peg system was, what is the dolphin's range resolution? Now, range resolution just means what's the smallest difference in distance that the dolphin can identify between 2 objects. So the dolphin was trained to inspect one phantom echo generator simulated object and compare it to the other simulated object. And then via a pedal press the pedal of the closer simulated object. And then once they knew this task, we were able to put those objects closer and closer in distance to one another until the dolphin could no longer tell what the closer object was. Now, I know this is a little bit difficult to probably visualize for everyone, so I do have a really fun video so people can see what this looks like. Now, in the top video, you'll see the animal first wearing a little suction cup on his melon, and we'll go over what that's doing in a little bit. And then the trainer's asking that dolphin to go underwater. Now, once the animal is underwater, he's going to go under and he's going to station in what we call a hoop station. And then he's going to echolocate on both of those peg systems that are simulating those objects. And then there you hear that buzzer bridge, again, communicating to him that he chose the correct response, he picked the right paddle. Then we'll look at this video one more time from another view. And so this is actually a view from San Diego Bay looking into his space as he's doing this. And you can see what simulated objects are. And that's actually him whistling after he gets the answer correct. So this is one of our young males, and he really, really enjoys doing this task. He's always really excited to come in and participate and play his virtual reality game. So that's something that's also really cool. The dolphins find these types of tasks very, very enriching and love to learn them. And so I'm going to move on to one more video so that we can stop and address why he's wearing this silly suction cup on his melon. Now, inside that suction cup is actually another one of these hydrophones. And if you notice when we pause the video, that he's actually closer. Sorry, everyone. I'll go back there. There we go. He's actually closer to this peg system that's on his right than to this peg system that is on his left. So even if the left peg system was simulating to him the closer object, because he's physically closer to this peg, he may perceive this object as closer. And so the range resolution in this case would potentially have a lot of error in it due to his actual just movement underwater and what peg system he's closer to. So what that hydrophone that's inside that suction cup does is actually mark the time that the click leaves his melon. And then we also know the time the click hits that hydrophone. And by knowing that distance, or by knowing that time, we're actually able to calculate the distance he is from each peg. And by doing that, we can adjust for his head movement in real time, which I think is absolutely so cool that computers can move that quickly to be able to adjust things this fast in the order of milliseconds and microseconds in real time. And so what that actually means for what he's perceiving is that those objects are moving with him versus being stationary, and sort of when he moves, they stay still. And so if he moves farther away, they'll kind of come with him. And that keeps the difference in distance between those two simulated objects consistent through the entire trial. And that way we get very, very accurate results of how good their echolocation actually is. And so when we tested this, we actually decided to test it at a lot of different ranges. So one of the questions being asked was, how does their echolocation change when objects or fish or things are farther away from them than when objects are really close to them? So we tested at a 1.75 meter range, and we actually went all the way out until 20 meters. And now this is going to circle back to some of the stuff that we already talked about. On the screen right now, and this kind of probably looks very foreign to a lot of people, but I did think it'd be really cool to show everyone, as a scientist, when you're running these sessions and when you're running these trials, this is actually what I get to see after every single trial. And so what this actually captures, every single one of these lines that you see on the screen is one of the dolphin's clicks. And the red lines are going to be when he's echolocating on that right peg. And then the blue lines are when he's echolocating on the left peg. So I can see how often he was echolocating right, how often he was echolocating left. And I can see this after every single trial, which is really cool. Now, the one thing that I also want to point out here is, since that is the space between every click, you'll notice this top graph is at the 20 meter distance that we tested, and the one right below it is actually at a 10 meter distance that we tested. So you'll notice those clicks get closer and closer to one another when that distance comes closer to him. And that's just like we saw in the first video with the dolphin echolocating on the fish. When she got closer, she really sped up how quickly she was echolocating. And so that's one big takeaway from this task, is we saw that at all of the ranges. We saw that shift very, very systematically as those objects got closer and closer to the animal. And then right below that is actually tracking that exact time between each click. Each one of those dots is tracking the time. So the closer the dots are, the faster the animal is echolocating. And then right below that is actually tracking the sound pressure level, or how loud the dolphin is clicking, how strong are their clicks that they're emitting. And this is something that's not talked about as much, but you'll notice that when those objects are farther away from the dolphin, they're actually echolocating a little bit louder. They increase the amplitude, or how loud they're clicking. And so right below that, it's sort of hard to see on the graph, but I have it listed out here for the sound pressure level, which is going to be, the amplitude, or how loud they're clicking. When the targets became closer to the animal, they actually reduced their amplitude and click by about 5 dB. And so they're not clicking as loud when those objects come closer to them. And then if we zoom in a little closer, so yeah, the resolution also on this, I know you can't tell that much, is actually also really good. So we can zoom into everything. And then you'll see this little gray click that's kind of hard to pick out, but that's actually the click that we're recording from that suction cup that the animal is wearing on their melon. And you'll notice that gets recorded right before the click that's recorded from that right peg or the left peg, if this click was blue. And so that's actually that time between when the dolphin emits the click and when it hits the receiver. That's actually how we're able to adjust those targets or those objects in real time as the dolphin's moving their head from right to left and kind of shifting in and out of that hoop station that they're in. And then this is just sort of fun. If anyone has ever been interested in what a dolphin click looks like, really, really, really zoomed in, it's kind of pretty basic, actually. It's a pretty smooth sinusoidal wave. Like I said, it's really, really rapid. This is usually only about 10 microseconds to 70 microseconds in time, so really, really quick. And when you zoom into it, it's pretty simple looking, but we are able to sort of analyze every single click this way and get a lot of information on what's going on when the dolphins are echolocating and when they're doing tasks like this. And so then you might also be asking for big picture stuff, the results of this specific experiment. And so this is kind of going a little bit down the science road, but I did think it would be fun to share a graph of all of the data collection from this range discrimination experiment that the dolphins did. And so on the screen right now, you'll actually see the results for 2 dolphins who participated in this experiment. And on the y-axis here, we have the threshold. So that's just pretty much how far away in distance were those objects when the dolphin could solidly do the task? And then at what point could the dolphin not do the task anymore? And then on the x-axis is going to be the distance of both of those objects. How far away were the 2 objects from the dolphin? And so right here, this one is going to represent when those objects are really close at 1.75 meters. So they only had to be 4 centimeters apart from each other, or different in distance, for the dolphin to be able to do this task. So when those objects were super close, the dolphin was really, really, really good at this task. But if we move the objects all the way out to 20 meters, you'll notice things changed a little bit. And so all the way out at 20 meters, those objects actually had to be almost 70 centimeters of difference in distance for the dolphin to be able to do this task. So this is sort of a unique question that's being asked in echolocation, is how do things change as the distance of objects change? And at what point, does their echolocation ability start to change when things get farther and farther away from the animal? And so that's sort of wrapping up the second experiment that I wanted to share with everyone. And so just a few takeaways that we've talked about today. One, how we study echolocation and why it's so important to study. And by studying how dolphins perceptually, use the echoes that they're listening to, and then also how they change their clicks when they're doing different tasks, really does give us better ways that we can conserve these species, protect the species, and really just better understand what echolocating species are doing in their environment. And so that concludes my talk, and I think I'll turn it over to Brittany and Celeste for questions.
Awesome. Katie, thank you so much. Amazing work, fascinating work. And thank you so much for donating your time to share this amazing research with all of our friends out in the audience. So if anyone has any questions for Katie, you can put them in the chat and we will get those off to her. But as you're coming up with those questions, typing them out, just want to thank you all for being here. The majority of our education and outreach work is based on the donations we receive. So we love doing these programs. We love educating the public, and just are really happy to see so many smiling faces, or at least black screens with names out there, a few smiling faces. And if you are interested in donating to the National Marine Mammal Foundation, specifically our community engagement team, you can find all of that information on our website, which we'll put in the chat. Very easy, just www.nmmf.org. And we'll just leave some time for questions. But thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Katie, for the incredible work you do, and also for taking time out of your evening to share it with everybody. And we'll just wait for some questions to come in if anyone has any. And if nobody has any questions, we can obviously end a little early, but we'll put our email address in the chat as well, so you can reach out to us. Oh, here we go. Here they come. Let's see. So you can also, if you think of a question later, you can always email it to our outreach team and we will forward that on to Katie. Okay, so we have a question for you, Katie. Someone wanted to know, do the dolphins watch each other play the game, and do they learn from each other?
We have seen them. I definitely will say the 2 experiments that I talked about are pretty complex. They do require pretty intricate training plans, which is one of my favorite parts of the job, is actually being able to work with the trainers and train the tasks and watch the animals learn. They usually get really excited when they're learning new things. So that part is always really fun. For some of the more general tasks, I do feel like they do watch each other and learn. For the phantom echo generator task, I feel that the animals really enjoy participating in it and are always very intrigued. And so what actually typically happens is that dolphins who are in like adjoining spaces will try to play the game while it's sort of not their turn. And so they might be located in the space behind the dolphin that's currently doing the task. And all of a sudden I'll see a lot of clicks coming in at once that I know are not all from that specific dolphin that's playing. And so you'll see other dolphins sort of try to join in the game sometimes, which is also pretty entertaining to watch. So we do see some learning, but also we just also see animals trying to participate when it's, I don't want to say not their turn, but when another animal is actually the one who we're asking to participate in the task at that time.
I think this was at 5 o'clock.
Oh, shit.
Amazing. She says thank you.
Oh, I got a direct question, but I can definitely read it if that's okay.
Yeah.
So the question was, how long does it take to train a dolphin and all of the necessary tasks in preparation for these experiments? And I think that's a really loaded question. And I feel like I've gone down the training route. I do have to get, our trainers are amazing. They're awesome. I'm also biased. I was one for a long time, so I know the importance of it. But it sort of depends actually. So the task, the range, that distance discrimination task that I showed you, we had one dolphin actually learn that in about 4 months. But I will say that was pretty unique, and he learned it extremely fast. The longest dolphin that took to sort of learn that task, it took about 8 months. So it does take a pretty long time, a lot of consistency. And like I said, really intricate training plans to train a lot of these tasks. And same thing with that first task, the match to sample task. The dolphin who sort of did that entire project, the project probably went on for about 2 years. And so where we actually start to what you see as the finished product are two very different things, but we do usually at this point sort of go through really step-by-step training plans and sort of how do we introduce each next step to the dolphin in a way that they're still going to want to participate and enjoy the task and understand what we're kind of asking of them. So.
Awesome. We had another really great question in the chat. Have you taken into account the sound signal path in shallow water, as in the dolphin might be receiving sound directly or from bouncing off the ocean floor?
Yes, we definitely have. So, and you can actually see it sometimes too in our recordings. You'll be able to see sort of where it's hitting the surface. The depth where we're working at is about I want to say it's about 10 meters, probably about 30 to 35 feet. So typically we don't, I mean, there's definitely a reflection from the ocean floor, but we see the one from the surface a lot more often. And it is something to just keep in mind because it does potentially give, we talked about the dolphin being able to use the frequency spectrum or the pitch to make determinations. It can in some cases give them in these types of experiments an extra cue to figure out the task. And so we are always kind of looking at the sound that's coming in and if it's possible that they're doing a different task than what we think they are doing because they're using, you know, that pitch of the sound versus maybe movement or something else that we're interested in studying.
Awesome. Some people in the chat just saying very interesting work, great work. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for coming. This was very enjoyable.
And I don't have any other questions coming in at this time. So I'll just, in case anyone's thinking of any last minute questions, I'm going to put our website as well as our email address for the community engagement team here in the chat. Okay, well, if no one has any other questions, we'll go ahead and wrap that up. But our email address is there in the chat in case you have any questions you think of. Thank you all so much again for being here. A final thank you, and thank you, Katie, for the amazing work and donating your time to talk to everybody today. Keep an eye out. We'll be having more of these upcoming in the future because the NMMF scientists have been hard at work. So we hope to have more of these in the future. And until then, have a wonderful rest of your evening and stay dry out there wherever you may be. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Brittany.